Nepean State? What the hell kind of way to act is that? To prepare for his role as a cop in The French Connection, Gene Hackman rode around with police officers. They wanted to see what he was made of, so they took him along to bust a suspect. And his reaction made their blood run cold. Gene Hackman never seemed like your typical leading man, and he wasn't. The rugged actor had to claw his way up the Hollywood ladder, leading to bitterness and anger that were the driving forces behind many of his legendary performances. Hackman's hard-knock roots went all the way back to his childhood, when his father dealt him a horrible betrayal. "Well, my dad left us when I was about 13, I guess. Was it easy? Hard? No, it's tough." He later described the heart and disappointment he felt watching his father give him a leisurely wave from the car as he drove off forever. For the next few years, Hackman turned more and more into a bad kid, belligerent and angry. He never got along well with authority figures, and even slept in a cell one night after stealing candy from a store. His only moments of peace were when he would go to the movies with his mother. When he was just 16, the restless teenager joined the Marines. He was still rebellious and looking for a fight, and his superiors despised him. More than that, a terrifying high-speed motorcycle accident in the early 1950s left him with a broken leg and a discharge notice from active duty. Now 22, out of the Marines and more lost than ever, Hackman made a move that would eventually make him famous. With nowhere left to turn and leaning into his love of cinema, he decided to head to New York and try to make it as an actor. He had to make ends meet in a series of demeaning jobs, like when he worked in the Chrysler Building on the night shift, polishing executives' leather armchairs. One day in 1955, Hackman was grinding away at yet another day job, working as a doorman at the Times Square Hotel. Who should walk past him but one of his old Marine drill instructors, one who had no love lost for his former troubled student? Reportedly, without even looking at him, the sergeant muttered, "Hackman, you're a sorry son of a botch." Although Hackman later said he was embarrassed both by the sergeant's put down and the crummy job his old superior had found him in, he considered it psychological warfare to succeed, despite everyone telling him he couldn't. During this time, Hackman had been dating a woman named Faye Maltese, and she seemed to be one of the only people who believed in him. After they married in 1956, later having 3 children, Maltese convinced Hackman to enroll in acting school at Pasadena Playhouse. If Hackman thought that acting school was going to be a way to reinvent himself, he'd never been so wrong. Now 26, he was significantly older than the 19-year-old who became his new classmate, and while they were, in his words, walking surfboards, he had the face and demeanor of your everyday mine worker. Is it really true that when you were at Pasadena Playhouse, you and Dustin Hoffman were picked the most leaks likely to succeed? I find that hard to believe. Well, I was certainly. However, one for authority, he also clashed with the instructors. One told him he wouldn't amount to anything, and at the end of his tenure, he incredibly got the lowest grade the Pasadena Playhouse had ever given. There was, however, one person he did get along with in school, a soon-to-be very famous person. He befriended an awkward 19-year-old who the rest of the class also hated, Dustin Hoffman. Hoffman was in full beatnik mode and often wore a suede vest with sandals. They made an odd pair and spent most of their breaks playing bongos together on the roof. Before they graduated, they'd both earned the moniker least likely to succeed from their classmates. By 1961, Hoffman was starting to work in bit parts on film. When this thing started happening in his career, his mother died tragically in a house fire. Hackman was in tatters as he dealt with the loss of his mother and with the fact that his inspiration for acting wasn't around to see him finally succeed. In 1967, his big break came at long last. He played Buck Barrow in Bonnie and Clyde, alongside big-name leads Warren Beatty and Faye Dunaway. It nabbed him an Academy Award nomination for Best Supporting Actor, and for the first time in his life, people were beginning to recognize him on the street. Right after he left the Pasadena Playhouse, Hackman had gotten into method acting, and he now took his interest to new depths. In his 30s, he would often walk around New York City and all but stalk people, watching and trying to imitate their every mannerism. But when his next iconic acting gig came up, it was a violent thriller, and Hackman's disappearance into the part was disturbing. In 1971's The French Connection, Hackman famously plays the rough-and-tumble officer, Popeye Doyle, who's intent on making the bust of his career. The film contains one of the most well-known car chase scenes of all time, and Hackman won an Oscar for Best Actor. But behind the scenes, the film was a nightmare. For one thing, the director William Friedkin was extremely opposed to casting Hackman in the lead role. Gene Hackman was not our first choice at all. In fact, he wasn't even on the list. Friedkin had asked, quite literally, every other tough guy actor he could. Paul Newman, Steve McQueen, Charles Bronson, before finally settling for Hackman. Hackman knew about how little Friedkin wanted him in The French Connection, and this only seemed to make him more surly on set. Even when he was on top, Hackman couldn't shake the idea that he was second fiddle, and this almost became a self-fulfilling prophecy. When he made the conversation with Francis Ford Coppola in 1974, one of his favorite works, he found out Coppola had wanted Marlon Brando first. Instead of accepting that everybody wants Brando first, Hackman let it fuel his performance with barely bottled frustration. When his performance as Harry Carl, the wiretapper, is nothing less than one of the decade's finest. Even though he was one of the most recognizable actors in Hollywood now, he still didn't have a hold on his fame. And a self-destructive streak began to rear its head. He blew through a mountain of money in the 1970s and early 80s, spending it on private planes, fancy cars, and other frivolities. This period of his life is full of films he'd rather have forgotten, but he was so broke he needed any job he could take. You eat guts. In 1981, at the peak of his financial issues, Hackman received devastating news. His best friend Norman Gary took his own life, leaving Hackman already something of a loner with even less of a support network. Then, just 5 years later, his marriage to female Tisi ended after 30 years together. Hackman was so down, he confessed he almost stopped acting entirely. Little did he know, he was about to enter his golden age. I'm gonna hold every damn one of them. Not many actors could come back from that kind of decline, but not many actors had Gene Hackman's steeliness. In 1988, he starred alongside Willem Dafoe as an FBI agent in the civil rights crime thriller Mississippi Burning, which earned him a nomination for yet another Best Actor Oscar. In '91, a rare leak came out about Gene Hackman's private life. He was in love again and getting married. His new bride was Betsy Arakawa, a concert pianist who was more than 30 years his junior. By '92, Hackman had fully settled into his legend period. So when Clint Eastwood called him up and asked him to play the violent Sheriff Daggett in his new Western Unforgiven, it looked like another slam dunk. I've been talking about that. But soon after Hackman walked on set and met his co-stars, he came to a realization that made his blood boil. One of his co-stars on Unforgiven was Richard Harris, who played a man Hackman brutally beats in one scene. The two of them had already worked together decades ago in the 1966 film Hawaii. But while Hackman remembered Harris well, he could tell Harris didn't remember him, and it was enough to make him snap. Hackman later admitted that for the fight scene, he concentrated all his anger over Harris's snub into his performance. Alan Parker, who directed Hackman in Mississippi Burning, once said that every director has a short list of actors he'd die to work with, and I'll bet Gene's on everyone. This was certainly the case when Wes Anderson began to write 2001's The Royal Tenenbaums. When coming up with the dysfunctional family's patriarch, Anderson wrote the part specifically with Hackman in mind, but when he reached out to him to do the film, Anderson got a response he wasn't expecting. Hackman's response was angry. He not only said absolutely not, he was offended at the very idea that Anderson would write a part for him, since that meant Anderson thought he knew him. In a New York Times interview later on, Hackman confessed that his initial reluctance to take on the part was because he did resemble the character, and he was ashamed of it. He said that he had treated his ex-wife, female Tessie, and even their children with a similar disdain as the Tenenbaum father, and didn't want them getting upset when they watched the movie. Wes Anderson claimed a lot of Hackman's reluctance actually came down to money. Because of the star-studded cast, everyone on the film was working at a lower salary, and Hackman would have to take a pay cut too. This, more than anything, may have informed his rejection of the role. But when it came to stubbornness, Hackman was about to meet his match. Wes Anderson wouldn't give up on having him in his film. He admitted, "I just kept bothering him. I wore him down." Finally, Hackman agreed to the part, and it was a decision that everyone would come to regret. For exclusive perks like early access to new videos, priority replies to your comments, and to have your say on future content, consider becoming a Factor8 member. On top of that, your support helps keep the channel going. Click the link in the description for more details. He may have agreed to star in the Royal Tenenbaums, but he never forgot that Anderson had all but forced him into it. He arrived on location with an enormous chip on his shoulder and proceeded to brutally cut down Anderson any way he could, calling him horrible names in front of the rest of the cast. He was really difficult. We can say it now, but he was a tough guy because older great actors do not give young directors much of a chance. They're really rough on him. And she was really rough on Wes, and I used to kind of step in there and just try to defend my friend. What the hell kind of way to act is that? Reportedly, Murray was so protective that he would come to set on his days off to supervise Hackman and make sure things didn't get too out of hand. He's the kind of guy that loves to be left alone. He loves to be left alone. What is that? According to reports from the set, Hackman's main issue wasn't with Anderson, but with his co-star, Luke Wilson. More specifically, Luke Wilson's enormous crush on Gwyneth Paltrow, who plays his love interest in the film. Wilson was so head over heels for Paltrow, he would consistently flub his lines if he was opposite her. This infuriated Hackman, who would hit his lines perfectly and then had to constantly redo them. Even so, many consider the Royal Tenenbaums to be one of Hackman's best performances in a long line of iconic roles. But little did anyone know, it would also be one of his last. After the Royal Tenenbaums, Hackman starred in just 2 other movies, Runaway Jury alongside his old friend Dustin Hoffman, and Welcome to Mooseport. After that, he went on Larry King in 2004 and told the host he believed his career was over. He never did work on a major movie again. While filming The French Connection, director William Friedkin hired some retired officers as consultants. Hackman and his co-star Roy Scheider also trailed the officers around for a month on patrol where they were supposed to just watch and learn. But that wasn't Hackman's style, and it nearly got him into big trouble. After spending some time with the officers, Hackman had a front-row seat to watch them apprehend a suspect. That's when he went off the rails. By now, he was so into character as Popeye Doyle, Hackman didn't think twice before jumping into the action himself, detaining the suspect and cramming him into a patrol car. All very illegally. True to form then, Hackman also didn't go gentle into that good night. On February 26, 2025, a maintenance worker made a fateful call at Gene Hackman's home. "Hello, my name is Roy. I think we just found one deceased person inside a house." The officers found Gene Hackman's body at the scene. At 95 years old, this would have been somewhat expected, but the rest of the details were shocking. Is the patient a male or a female? A female and a male? Probably. I don't know if there's just somebody up here real quick. Okay, not just Hackman, but also his wife Betsy, and one of their 3 dogs, were also found dead inside the house. It seemed they'd been that way for a while. As the days passed, more information emerged, though it provided little clarity on what had happened. Hackman and his wife were found in different rooms, with decomposition clear on Arakawa's remains. Pills were also found in their home, and investigations ruled out carbon monoxide poisoning. After days of medical and police investigation, officials determined it was Arakawa who died first, on or just after February 11th. She'd become infected with hantavirus pulmonary syndrome, an illness spread by rats that causes flu-like symptoms, and which can cause fatal respiratory difficulties if left untreated. Meanwhile, officials determined that Hackman likely died on February 18th, the last time his pacemaker had activity, about a week after his wife. His autopsy showed that he died of heart disease while suffering from late-stage Alzheimer's. Investigators sadly think it was very possible, given his mental condition, that he wasn't aware Arakawa had died in the house. None of this tragedy, however, can take away from his legacy as one of the greatest actors of his generation, or in Hollywood's history. If you enjoyed this Factinate video, give it a thumbs up and subscribe for more incredible stories. If you want to see and who we cover next, join our membership program through the link in the description for exclusive perks. Your support means everything to us. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.